What's up, guys? It's Dan from Coin Bureau Trading. Today, we're going to talk about whether the crypto market has been suppressed over the last few months, and if so, who could be behind it. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ping that notification bell. Before we get started, do keep in mind that nothing in this video is financial advice. It's just my personal analysis of the crypto market. Your analysis could be different, and if it is, that's awesome, because the more difference of opinion that we have, the better traders and the better investors we're all going to become. So I want to start off with this chart, guys, which might look familiar. It's one that I've shared before, and that's basically a global liquidity compared to Bitcoin's price. And you can see that starting sometime over the summer, we started to see a decoupling between global liquidity, which continued rising, and Bitcoin's price, which basically started chopping sideways. And as most of you will know, most other assets, whether it's precious metals, large cap stocks, even small cap stocks, foreign stocks, they all basically continued following global liquidities, which is what you would expect to see. But again, sometime over the summer, Bitcoin decoupled from global liquidity, and of course, so did the rest of the crypto market, basically meaning that the crypto market all of a sudden stopped getting this liquidity, and everything else kept getting liquidity, but the crypto market did not. Of course, this begs the question of what the reason for that was. I'm sure you guys have heard a whole bunch of different theories. I think the most popular one is that it was because of the Treasury General account being refilled. The only problem with that theory is that this kind of disconnect between Bitcoin and global liquidity started before the Treasury General account started being refilled. So this is something that was already present before, all these other excuses and reasons you're hearing from other people. All of these factors were already, or I guess came afterwards, after this decoupling of liquidity. So that begs the question, what was the real reason? Well, if you've been keeping up with my content, basically I think that there's two possible reasons. One of them is from the macro side, which is basically an issue in private credit, which affected crypto. The TLDR there is that the crypto industry has to borrow primarily from private credit because they can't borrow from banks. And of course, the types of people in private credit who are lending to crypto are probably the ones who tend to be, let's say, more risk on, like they're more keen to lend to riskier clients. And these are exactly the types of private credit funds that have been going under since the summer, especially since the fall. So that could be one reason from a macro side. But on the crypto side, one thing I mentioned was the possibility basically of some kind of price suppression, which of course is going to be the topic of today's video. For those of you who don't know, like it's long been known that the crypto market is fairly manipulated. Not to burst anyone's bubble, but the crypto market consists primarily of crypto whales and of retail investors. There aren't that many institutions. I know you hear about all these different institutions buying and everything. As a total kind of like fraction of the market, they're a very small fraction, like as a percentage of the market, they're a very small fraction of that. Like 80 to 90% of spot Bitcoin ETF flows are retail, and then everything that is not kind of in TradFi, that's you're basically dealing with stuff on exchanges. You're just dealing with like crypto whales and retail essentially. There's very little institutional activity there, and of course, everyone started to suspect that there was some kind of manipulation going on ever since we saw that 19 billion basically long liquidation in October. Because the interesting thing is there, guys, is that you would have thought that as a result of this liquidation, that everyone was saying, and you guys might remember this on social media, everyone was saying like, oh, who blew up? Like there must have been some investment firm that basically was having issues and they basically blew up, and this is what caused the market to crash. And what's interesting is that we have not seen, at least not the time of shooting, which is not too long before you see this video. At the time of shooting, we have still not seen anyone raise their hand and say, yeah, like I lost hundreds of billions of dollars and that's why I went bankrupt and that's why the crypto market was so negatively affected. We haven't heard any of that. So of course, logically, that suggests that there must be someone who was kind of suppressing prices, and in this case, who basically purposely caused this crazy liquidation event. Of course, I'm sure you guys have heard that a lot of people have been blaming Binance, and the reason being is that you can see a lot of transfers basically on chain. You can see a lot of basically Bitcoin going into hot wallets on Binance, and a whole bunch of stuff suggesting that that there could be selling pressure coming from Binance. The only problem here, guys, and this is I think the key takeaway, honestly, one of the key takeaways of this video, is that when you see whether it's Binance selling, or Wintermute selling, or even like CZ, people accusing CZ of selling or whatever, you have to remember that that money probably doesn't belong to them. I know this sounds kind of crazy, but people really, they're very easy to forget that, yes, quote unquote Binance is selling, but it's not Binance, it's someone on Binance. Same idea. Yes, Wintermute is selling, but it's probably someone on Wintermute, and even something like these high profile guys in crypto who are very, very wealthy. I'm not sure in CZ's case, but I know that in the case of other people, which I probably won't mention, some other people that you see in crypto who are like these crypto billionaires, that money doesn't look like it belongs to them at all. It looks like it belongs to other people, and they're just there to manage it for them and and kind of be the front man so that if anything goes wrong, they're the ones who get in trouble legally, if that makes any sense. And again, I'm not saying that's the case with CZ, but let's just say that that's something that does happen in the crypto industry. So yeah, when you see Binance selling again, that doesn't necessarily mean it's Binance. It's just someone else who's using Binance who's doing the selling. Of course, same idea, Wintermute, and this is where things get a little bit kind of sketchy, is that Wintermute admitted after the fact that, yeah, they stopped basically providing liquidity during this crash, which arguably, contributed to why that crash was so bad, because as soon as it started, as soon as whoever, what I imagine happened is that someone started basically really pushing down the price of something on exchanges. Market makers saw this and they're like, this selling pressure is coming out of nowhere. This looks very risky. I'm going to basically withdraw my liquidity, which basically made things worse for everyone who still had positions open, which of course was mostly retail. So all the retail investors got wrecked while these market makers basically pulled out to protect themselves. And of course, most retail were not able to do that. So they all got wrecked. And so here's where things you could say get a little bit speculative, but something that I've noticed that's very fascinating. So again, October 10th, 2025, we get this massive, basically record level of liquidations, even more so than FTX. For some reason, there's no one that, like, you can't really find someone, you can't really point at someone, say, hey, this person went bankrupt and that's why the market crashed. We can't see any of that, which suggests that, yeah, there might have been some kind of, intentional manipulation there. And it's possible that the market makers kind of, whether or not they were involved, I'll leave that up to you guys. But it's possible these market makers saw that some kind of manipulation was going on and they're like, okay, we're pulling out our liquidity out of safety. And that just basically made things even worse for everyone else, right? So this is where things are really interesting, is in the days and weeks following, like almost immediately after this October 10th liquidation, we start to see some very interesting things. Of course, the first is that Coinbase announces that it's going to list BNB, which is pretty crazy because, of course, this is like the same, like if you have, I think I've used this example many times before, but it's like if Apple added support for the Google Play Store and just didn't say anything. You would be like, well, wait a minute, like, Apple, they have their Apple App Store, they have a monopoly. They would not allow their competitor, to have software, in their phones, in their devices, right? There must have been some kind of deal that was signed behind the scenes. Same idea here. You never, ever, ever, ever see exchanges in crypto like listing the tokens of their competitors. That's like, you're helping your competitor. You would never do that as an exchange, because it's very cutthroat and very competitive. But here we go. Binance is listing BNB. I mean, they've already did, and this happened on October 22nd, which is very bizarre. And this nice way of putting it here by CoinSpeaker, signaling shift in crypto exchange dynamics. It almost sounded like Binance was saying, again, especially when you combine this with the fact that, it looks like someone on Binance was pushing down the price, then all of a sudden BNB gets listed on Coinbase, which is just crazy. It's unprecedented. It's like like Coinbase is basically, I don't want to say being forced, but someone's like, hey, Coinbase, you better help us out. You better help out BNB. And of course, everyone assumes that it's CZ. But even then, guys, remember that I believe, just off the top of my head, I think that only 20% of BNB's supply initially went to CZ and to Binance and whatever. The rest went to investors. So this, again, it might not be CZ. It could be someone who's a big investor in Binance and is kind of behind the scenes and you don't even know their name. So that's just something to keep in mind. And here's where things get interesting as well. I think that the very next day, apparently, Trump pardons CZ, which of course is crazy, right? It's like, so you have this huge liquidation, which was, some people were arguing was caused by Binance. Then a few days, basically like less than 2 weeks later, you see Coinbase listing BNB. You see CZ being pardoned by Trump. And not only that, and this is something that's a little bit more nuanced, but you see FTX withdrawing. This is now in early November, so I guess like 3 weeks later, you see FTX withdrawing their motion seeking to limit repayments in China, Russia, and other restricted jurisdictions. I guess a little bit of backstory. Some people blame or like allege or whatever that CZ kind of played a role in the collapse of FTX because I think he was like making some comments about like FTT and all this like FTT collateral. But again, like a lot of people blame him. Again, it's not entirely clear that it was his fault, but some people would say, hey, like Binance played a role and it was in their interest for FTX to go down, right? Whether it was Binance or someone else, wouldn't surprise me at all if there was other exchanges that were like, yeah, we really want to see FTX go down, and they wanted to create fear so that FTX would collapse, because if FTX collapses, that basically allows there to be more market share taken back by these other exchanges, right? So anyway, it's just really interesting that initially FTX, the bankruptcy estate was unwilling to basically repay clients that were in China and Russia in these kind of offshore jurisdictions. Then all of a sudden they just quietly changed that decision, which again sounds like there's almost this like offshore, onshore, you know what I mean? That these large offshore entities that are affiliated with Binance and all these other and exchanges and market makers basically said, yeah, like we were the ones that pushed down the price. And if you want to have prices go up, then you have to listen to what we say and you have to do X, Y, and Z. And again, people assume that this is CZ who's the one pulling the strings, but it could just as easily be someone else. It might not be him. And from what I've learned in crypto, the people who are really in control are not the ones that you see, and you might not even know their names. I think I already said that like once before. But anyway, so again, you get that huge liquidation in crypto that was allegedly caused by Binance or someone on Binance. Then we have Coinbase listing BNB, CZ being pardoned, and FTX basically allowing repayments to jurisdictions that are kind of like aligned with Binance in the following weeks after that, right? And I think the craziest thing, and like the kind of, you could say, circumstantial evidence that there's some kind of, like turf war going on. This headline has now been completely buried, and this was basically, there was an allegation, some report that CZ was allegedly involved in like funding Hamas or whatever. It was all over the mainstream media, and you guys might remember it was in the news for like a week and then just completely disappeared. And what's really interesting is I feel like that was part of some kind of pressure campaign here. Basically, people saying, hey, like if you keep pushing us here, if you keep demanding all these things and saying like we're not going to let you, we're not going to let markets rise until you comply, then we're going to go on the offensive and we're going to start spreading bad news and stuff about you to get you in trouble. You know what I mean? That's what it looks like to me as an outsider, where it's like, whether it's CZ or Binance or someone affiliated with them was basically forcing the onshore industry to give all these concessions. You need to list BNB, you need to pardon CZ, and you need to allow all this money, all these billions of dollars that are, that were lost in FTX. You need all that. We want all that money to come back to us out here on the offshore crypto industry. And then this onshore people are like, and then maybe they gave them everything they wanted, and then these offshore entities continued asking for more, and the onshore entities are like, bro, like, we're not going to put up with this, so we're going to start basically pushing back against this. And as soon as you started to see this pushback, it's just interesting how things started to like calm down, at the end of November. From my perspective, guys, we kind of have this grand finale, which is really interesting, which is that Binance names basically the co-founder Yi He as co-CEO alongside Richard Tang. This was reported in earlier this month, in early December. Some of you guys might know that Yi He is CZ's wife, I believe. And not only that, but basically Richard Tang was kind of put in place because you guys might remember that like Binance got sued and CZ got in trouble and all this stuff. It was all in the States. And as part of the agreement, as part of the lawsuit, of the settlement of the whatever criminal case or whatever civil case, I can't remember the details. As part of the deal, basically Binance had to basically submit to being surveilled by like, onshore regulators, and they put in their own guy as the CEO. I'm not saying Richard Tang is like necessarily onshore, but they basically requested all these changes to Binance. And it's interesting that now you're seeing all these changes rolled back. And it's just very interesting to me that as of December 3rd, now you have Yi He, who's kind of like, you could say this offshore insider, right, is back in that role, which is, some people would argue is like also CZ has some influence there indirectly. Then all of a sudden, since that time, the markets are suddenly starting to function a little bit better, starting to rise a little bit more. Of course, by the time you see this video, who knows, it could be either way, but it's just very fascinating to me that if you look at the price action over the last couple of months, right, like again, crypto saw this disconnect between liquidity over the summer, and then in October, in November, it got absolutely hammered. And throughout this period, you basically saw what looks like an open negotiation between the onshore crypto industry and offshore crypto industry, with them saying that here, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we want some of this, and then they saying, oh, you're going too far, we're going to start accusing you of funding Hamas. And then they say, okay, fine, then we want Yi He as co-CEO. They say fine, and then now everything is settled and everything's okay. That's what it looks like to me as an outsider. You might say that's crazy, but I think it makes for a pretty good Christmas video. Anyways, guys, if you are trading crypto by any chance on this Christmas day, then do check out the link in the description, specifically that first link, BitGet up to 50,000 USDT deposit bonus. It'll take you to a page that looks like this. You'll see that, yes, the Coin Bureau does have a partnership with BitGet, but on a personal note, I'm a huge fan of BitGet. I think it's an awesome exchange. That does not mean that you should be keeping your crypto on BitGet or any other exchange. You should always be keeping your crypto on your personal wallet. But with that being said, guys, like it's really an awesome exchange. They have on-chain trading, they have futures, they have spot trading, they have AI trading, they have tokenized stocks, they have a whole bunch of different stuff. It's completely free to sign up. So, make an account, see if you like the features on there. And if you do, with some luck, you'll get enough trading volume to basically get some of these bonuses here, which again is up to 50,000 USDT. Anyways, guys, if you did make it this far and you did find that information helpful or interesting, then be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, ping that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.